One of the things about making scenes in Blender, and if you're working in Blender Eevee, you'll know that if you're putting in lots and lots of objects, it can eventually slow down your computer. So one of the ways around this, and wow, this is so simple, is to create instances. Some of you may have used in the past the particles system for creating particles, but that's also quite heavy. You can make linked objects using Alt-D, for example. So you have linked textures and data and animation and so forth. One of the more efficient ways, of course, is to make an instance of your object. And you can make as many instances as you want, and that definitely is a much more efficient way of populating your scene with many objects of the same type without weighing down the computational power needed for the scene. But one of the things is that most of those objects that are instanced and copied in that way will all look the same, so it becomes a little bit complicated to try and make your scene look believable or varied. However, there is a way to do it, for example, and I'm going to use Piggy here, which is in its own collection called Sample, and I'm going to make an instance of this Piggy to start with, simply by going Shift A, and I go down to Collection Instance, and I choose the collection in which the pig is, which is called Sample, and I've suddenly got a copy of the pig here. If I switch on the overlays, you'll see that it's inside an instanced object empty, and there it is. It's an instance, sampled instance. But as you can see, it's immediately a different color to the original piglet. So if I select that object again, and I go Shift D this time, like to make a simple way of making a copy of an instance. So I have two instances. The next one is blue. The next one is orange, green, and so forth. And the color keeps changing for each instance. Now, what's probably unusual here is that there's no such thing as a turquoise or a yellow pig, not that I'm aware of, at least not in Ireland. But you can adjust the parameters to make sure that the variation from your original object is not so great, or is great, depending on what your requirements are. So let's have a look at what is going on. I'm going to select the original piglet, and maybe what I'll do is just for now, I'll delete all those, or maybe I won't delete them. I'll just hide them for the moment and go back to my original pig. And let's have a look at what's going on. I have here a randomized texture group node into which I've plugged the original texture, albedo, diffuse map, whatever you want to call it, into the BSDF principled node. So what is in this randomized node that is causing this effect to change the texture for each instance? And let's see if I just tab into that, and we'll see what's going on. And it's fairly straightforward, actually. So if you go to the end of the chain, plugged into the output node, you have this hue saturation node, and there is plugged into each of the values, the hue, the saturation, and the value, the darkness and the lightness, a map range node. Map range, and in each case I've renamed it so that you have one for darkness, one for the saturation, how deep the color is, and one for the color range. In other words, is it going to be going all the way from white to black and every other color in between, or is it just variations of a color brown, for example? And then I have a noise texture plugged into the value of each one of those map range nodes. And all of those go into the random value on an object info node. And then the minimum and the maximum for each of the map range nodes are plugged into the group output, creating this randomized texture node. So that's it, fairly straightforward and simple. And you can obviously do variations of other aspects of your texture if you want. And then by adjusting the minimum color and the maximum color, you limit or extend the range of colors that are available for the copies that appear when you do your duplications. And the same for the saturation. If you have a low saturation minimum and a high saturation maximum, you're going to get a wide range of saturated colors. And for the lightness and darkness equally. So if I turn back on my instances, and maybe I can turn off that wow, this is so important. You'll see the impact of restricting the range for each of those categories as I adjust them accordingly, and you'll see that the color variations, the light variations, the saturation variations are also adjusted. So you can have a very subtle difference or a very wide range of differences in your instance objects. It's a great way of duplicating objects in your scene and maintaining some extra additional element of realism. So I hope you find that useful. If you do, please like and follow. I'll make more tutorials, and if you have a particular question that you'd like answered, feel free to ask, and it may spark a tutorial to help, and obviously to show you the node setup that you would use to solve that problem. And there it is again. This blue one is a map range node, and this is a noise texture node plugged into an object info and with inputs and outputs and a hue saturation at the end. And I guess that's it. And we might end by simply saying, wow, so simple.